Now we begin the final and most lengthy phase of the painting, which is applying the opaque flesh colors. These three pieces of paper will be very useful for you to have available and follow along with me while you're watching the remainder of the program. The two sheets on the left represent a synopsis of all of the colors that I've already laid on the painting, as well as those that are going to be laid on the painting. I want to call your attention to the center of the first page, down in that middle column where it says the overpainting flesh mixtures. Those are the colors I'll be working on for the next half hour at least, and those colors will relate to the ones that I'll show you just a moment on my palette. As we go through the painting, you'll see each and every section listed in terms of the colors I'm going to apply. While I might not take it in exactly the same order as they're listed on these two sheets, you can be certain that I do hit every area of the painting, even if it's a bit out of order. Now, this piece is one of the most important references that you'll have. In spite of what it looks like, it is not a paint by number. What it is a graphic representation of the shapes that I lay down for each value and color that I put on the face. Without this, it might get a little bit confusing as to exactly what color I use in any given area, because some of these values and colors are very, very close. So this will simplify your understanding as well as some of your decisions if you're deciding to paint along with me. I usually prepare flesh mixes in advance, regardless of whether I'm copying a painting or whether I'm working from life. And although the colors might not always be in this specific array, they always range from the very lightest highlight down to the darkest shadow tone that I find in the face itself. Just to give you a review of what these colors represent, the first one is a pale yellow that I'll be using for a highlight. The second mixture is my basic light flesh tone, the one that I'll use to mix other colors with in the lighted areas of the face. The third mix is a medium light blush color. This will be found in the cheek areas around the eyes, the nose, and it'll form the basis for some of the lip color as well. The fourth mix is a medium light violet. This is the color that begins to go into the receding planes of the face, those that turn away from the light. The fifth mix is a medium dark brown orange. This also is found in the shadow tones of the face and will be the basic flesh mix for shadow areas, along with a cool shadow tone that's a medium dark violet color. Between these two, I should be able to find any colors that represent the shadow areas of the face. So I'll refer you now to the instruction sheet that I just referenced to see exactly which ones of these mixes are used in any given area of the face. Another thing, you'll notice that the lid is on my jar of painting medium. I don't use any painting medium during this phase. I'll apply all of the paint in the beginning with this white bristle filbert brush. I'll load it fully on both sides before I begin to paint, and I'll wipe the brush completely between successive colors so that I won't contaminate one color with another. The colors that I'll be using in the face are very close in color and value, and I would refer you to the color sheet that's included with your video case to see how subtle some of those variations are. I begin by laying on the very lightest highlight. That gives me the lightest value on the face, and I begin to work down from there toward the darkest values. It's just an economy to be able to paint everything that's the same value while you have it on your brush. So you'll notice me moving around the face, laying down flesh tones successively moving to slightly darker values and tones. Some people begin by painting the dark areas of the face, and that's a perfectly legitimate way to do it. I don't have any quarrel with that. For efficiency's sake, I have learned that if I lay on my paint from light to dark, since I have an underpainting and I know what the dark areas are going to be by virtue of my underpainting, then I can move more easily from lighter colors to darker colors without contaminating each successive color with a previous one. If you have a dirty brush with a dark color and you try to move into a light color, you're going to find that the light value is always slightly muddier if you work from dark to light than it would be if you work the other way. I recommend that you give this a try just to see if that doesn't keep your colors cleaner and less muddy. Now, I'm not showing you all of the changes where I wipe the brush, reload, just for the sake of efficiency of time in filming this program. But I want you to know that this is a very considered time. This being the center of interest, you don't want to paint it hurriedly. And you'll notice that I'm laying on a generous amount of paint in each one of these areas, and I'm overlapping one into the adjacent color. If you just put them side by side as if each one were a piece of an interlocking puzzle, you're not going to get a smooth blend like Waterhouse had on his faces. I overlap the colors so that I'll be able to come back and get a porcelain-like blend once I've got all of these colors laid on. Now, some people ask me, is it okay to blend as you go? And yes, it is. That's not the way that I work, whether I'm copying or whether I'm working from life. I like to present a method of painting to you that can translate into all of the forms or subject matter that you might use, which is to get down the important masses first in their relationship of shape and value to each other without worrying about the details or how smooth it looks. If you get the value and the shape right, you will have captured not only the likeness of a face, but the gesture, and many times it has a very fresh quality, a very painterly quality, if you're striving for that look, which I do. Many of the painters in Waterhouse's day strived for a very smooth look with no brushwork at all. Waterhouse was not looking for a smooth look, although some of his faces were porcelain smooth. As he worked out toward the outer areas of his composition, his brushwork became quite loose and gestural. So I would say put the paint down in a gestural form in the beginning, and then you can go either way. You can leave it with a thick, lush, painterly quality, or you can smooth it to a porcelain finish. This way it gives you the choice of how far you want to take it. You see, this face is already beginning to have the feeling of a solidity and form, and the brushwork itself feels painterly, even though I haven't done anything yet that is, or what could be characterized as detailed. Now I'm coming to the blending stage, where I take a clean brush, has no paint on it, and I move the paint together to just remove the hard edges between the two areas of paint. I'm always looking to keep the flesh without an edge next to the area of the hair, so that I can come back and pull hair into that area without having it look like it's a wig or a helmet. Almost always I start in the lightest areas of the paint that I laid down initially. So you can see me returning to the same areas that I applied the paint initially to blend, saving the areas next to the darkest values until last. I haven't touched anything in that darkest area of the eye socket. I'm still working in the light areas of the face to achieve a smoother blend. Now, this is not the finishing stage. This is just to remove the excess paint and give it a more satin quality, if you will. If you prefer to leave the brush marks that were laid on initially, well, that's certainly a choice you could make aesthetically that would please you. You know, there's no right or wrong in how much paint should or should not be left on the canvas. It's a matter of the artistic choice. Notice that I'm not trying to work around the eyes. The flesh tones are pulled right into the area of the iris, the white of the eye. I pay no attention to individual features other than trying to keep them in the place that I put them initially. I bring the flesh tones right over the mouth. If you pull the flesh tones from the upper eyelids down into the eye sockets, believe it or not, the color that's deposited there will be almost exactly what you need for representing the white of the eye when it comes time to paint those individual features. What I'm really doing is painting a mask of flesh onto this head. I'm trying to avoid thinking individual features. I really want to get the feeling, if you put, say, a stocking over someone's head, you wouldn't be able to see their eyelashes or the hole in the nostril of their nose or the split in the mouth, but you would be able to see the shape of their cranium. You could see where the bone of the nose juts out from the face. You would see where the brow bone comes forward. That's really what I'm trying to accomplish in this stage, is to get the feeling of the bone structure that the skin covers. Once you have the flesh laid in and you've lost all the edges between them, if you lost some of the brilliance of a color, say in the cheek area or in the rosiness under the cheek, it's perfectly okay to go back and add that back in on top. This paint being very wet, it ought to slide in easily, and you can make all kinds of very fine adjustments just by laying additional paint on top. When I lay paint on in this stage, I don't add very much, not nearly as much as I had in the initial stage where I was trying to cover the canvas in the beginning. You'll notice that I may take a soft sable type brush to get an even smoother blend. Also, you can see the benefit of the underpainting, that glaze of flesh color. The hands really feel like they belong to the face, even though they had no paint on them until just now. The underpainting color always helps you to make judgments about how light or dark or warm or cool you need to paint adjacent areas. If I didn't have that background and the sleeve color and the hair color already there, if you painted the colors I'm using right now on a stark white canvas, you wouldn't believe how dark they would look. They would look totally unnatural. That's why it's so important for you to have a value in color down everywhere on the painting surface before you start to finish, because the colors that and values that you choose for the final presentation of the painting have to relate to what they're next to. And if that hasn't been suggested in the beginning, then it's a much more difficult decision-making process. Sometimes just a single stroke of a different value can make everything understandable, like those little fingers that lay on top of the other hand. That whole mass becomes understandable with just the touch of a single value. The area around the arms, it's okay to have a hard edge where it meets the hair or the sleeve. And you'll notice that I'm reshaping some of that sleeve because I didn't think I got it out quite far enough. That hard edge between the sleeve, the hair, and the hand really sets the hand off. Now I'm going to return to the face and begin the finish of the face, where we actually lay in some of the details that that you might think would be the first thing that you do on the face. Actually, this is the last thing. After you have the surface of the face prepared, then you can go in and begin to add the details. I like to begin with the eyelash line, the upper eyelash line, because it's the darkest value on the face generally, especially of a woman. And once you have that set in, then you can see how dark you can go, say in the depth of the eye sockets and the darkness of the eyebrow color. Generally, the eyebrow color is not nearly as dark as that on the upper eyelash line. I've switched to a number 10 flat sable to do this kind of detail work so that I can have a little bit more control, but you could certainly use a smaller white bristle filbert and accomplish the same thing. I don't always use this, this brush to paint faces. It just seemed appropriate for this one. By establishing these very dark areas first, I can know how dark I need to go in other areas like the nostrils of the nose, the split in the mouth. Now you notice that I skipped an area across the lightest area of that brow bone. It lightened considerably there. If you'll look for that point on any face that you do where the brow bone juts out, you'll see that it helps to make the form round and have the volume that actually exists in that area. The eyebrow is typically darker, closer to the nose, the center of the face, and it's lighter where it goes over the eyebrow and out toward the temple area. The crease in the eyelids is never as dark as the eyelash line itself, and I typically use a warm red violet in that area. Caput Mortuum violet is an excellent color to use for the crease in the lids for anyone of almost any flesh color. Then I soften it up into the wet paint to create the depth of that eye socket and the shadow that's created by the bridge of the nose projecting forward. That shadow is really, really important to make the eyes sit back in the head. You'll notice that I've slowed down considerably in my laying on of paint and the blending process. Each stroke will make the likeness of this face change. Moving a little piece like that a little bit further toward the center of the face, a little further out, will either narrow the face or broaden it. There's a lot of red found around the eyes, so don't be timid about using some of your blush flesh color up in the area of the eyes. Although I haven't painted the iris yet, you see how it almost looks like it has an iris. That's the underpainting showing through, and that's the benefit of having that drawing under there with the strong values. Of course, once the irises are actually painted in, well, they do cover up the drawing that you laid on in the Biester drawing stage as well as the underpainting glaze stage. The whites of the eyes are never as white as you think they are. They're always at least the value of the flesh tone that surrounds them. They might be a slight bit cooler in temperature toward the blue end of the spectrum, but they're never just blue. If you paint the whites of the eyes blue, it will have an unreal sort of advertising illustration quality, and it won't have the feeling that it's a real person. A real person has pinks in the eyes, and those pinks come directly out of the flesh tones. I don't paint the lower eyelash line. What I do paint is the slight change in value that you see because the lower lid is sunk into the eye socket. So if you can think about painting flesh under the eye as opposed to painting a lower lash line, you're likely to have a more successful eye that sits down in the head as opposed to one that looks like it's just been cut out and pasted on out of a child's illustration book. Now you can use a variety of types of brushes to accomplish this. Sometimes I use a sable filbert. Sometimes I use a very small flat sable. Again, I'm thinking of this area as flesh, not as hairs on the lower lash line. If you can just make that simple change in your thinking about what it is, you're more likely to make it look like what you want it to be. To make the eyes match, you really need to get them exactly the same value and shape in the iris. And that eye on the far side of the head tends to get painted a little large once you're laying on flesh tones. The brow bone may tend to grow and the face broaden. That's when you come back with your hair color and just carve right into it. And the edge of the eye is lost on that far side of the face, lost into the hair color. And although it is a hard edge, we don't want it to be carved out so strongly that it doesn't feel like the flesh rolls over. So if you'll just take the excess paint off the edge where the flesh rolls into the hair, it'll feel more like the flesh rolls over into a three-dimensional form. When I add the hair color to carve out the face, I don't put any medium in it. I'm just using the pure paint mix, nice and as full and thick as any of the flesh mixtures. The nose is always called out by the cavity in the eye socket on the far side. So that shape of the shadow that surrounds the eye also defines the nose. So that's very important to get set in properly. Just making a few adjustments to make the eyes appear to match each other. The smallest strokes can make all the difference in the world. Value of the eyebrow typically just slides right into that deep eye socket there near the center of the face. It's important to keep the edges of the eyebrows where they meet the flesh tones soft, that is, not hard-edged darks. The darkest areas of the eyebrows are really found in the middle of the form, not out at the far edges. So sometimes you can just touch that to the wet paint next to it and soften it, and it'll give the feeling of hairs growing out of the flesh rather than something that you bought at a costume store and glued on your face. So always try to get the feeling of the eyebrow the way it really and truly sits in the face, and not think of it as something separate from the face. Now I'm showing you how often I revisit these areas to get the values exactly the way I want them. If you can do it in one stroke and it goes in and it's right, that's wonderful. If it doesn't go in with a single stroke, don't be frustrated. Go back and continue to work it until it does. On the nose, up in the bridge of the nose, the shadow is actually in the eye socket, but down near the tip of the nose, the darkest area is actually on the nose, not beside it on the cheek. And you can see me shaping that tip end of the nose, which has quite an angular quality. If you look at Waterhouse's original painting, you'll see that this model had quite a distinctive nose. The plane across the top of the nose isn't always the lightest. You can see I'm placing a slightly darker area, and then the highlight is right on the side that sort of turns the corner, because the light illuminating this model is not from overhead, it's coming from the side, almost straight into her. So the top plane of her nose is not going to receive that light. The light goes on the corner of the bridge of the nose, just like it's right over the brow bone of her eyebrow. It's in the same place on that rounded form as the highlight on rounded forehead. Typical mistake made in painting faces, whether it's copying someone else's that's already been painted or painting from life, is that painters, beginning painters, tend to want to make noses smaller rather than the size that they are. They don't look natural if they're unnaturally small. So don't minimize noses. Even this beautiful model had quite a prominent nose, and it doesn't detract from her beauty at all. Sometimes you have to carve out the shape of the nose by being observant that the offside cheek is really lighter in value, and you can actually shape the nose better by painting around it rather than painting the nose itself. It's sort of like carving out the profile on the side of the face with hair. Now I've moved down to a number 4 flat sable. You can see in doing some of the detail I'm really getting into smaller and smaller brushes. The number 4 is about the smallest brush I ever use, but if you need to go smaller, by all means, choose the brush that is convenient for you to use and one that you're familiar with. I lay in the split in the mouth first to establish the separation between the upper and the lower lip. Then I'll add the fullness of the lower lip, the fullness of the upper lip. And try to get a soft edge between the upper edge of that lip and the flesh just above it. The hardest edges in the mouth should be located in the corners. The lower lip can be suggested just with a little bit of darker value at the very lower edge where it turns into the chin. Often you don't put any paint other than that. You see, I really could leave it. Probably won't be able to, but there's not much else that needs to be done, so don't work it to death. The corner of the mouth is important to set the mouth in and give it a pleasant expression. If you don't give that little softening there at the corner of the mouth, the expression on the face tends to become very solemn and almost sad looking. There's almost always a depression under the lower lip that shows where the chin rolls back into the area of the teeth. Changing the value of the lips from one side of the face to the other can help the lip appear to turn around the face in a three-dimensional form. course, it needs its little corner over there for a slight dimpled effect to give that pleasant look on the other side of the face as well.